Section 65 of the Pearl Storybook, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas, and New Year's. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Pearl Storybook, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas, and New Year's by Ada M. Skinner and Eleanor L. Skinner. Naming the Winds, Indian Legend Retold by Ada M. Skinner. Gao, the great master of the winds, decided to choose his helpers from the animals of the earth. He blew a strong blast that shook the rocks and hills, and when his reverberating call had ceased its thunderous echoes, he opened the north gate wide across the sky and called Yaoga, the bear. Lumbering over the mountains as he pushed them from his path, Yaoga, the bulky bear, who had battled the boisterous winds as he came, took his place at Gao's gate and waited the mission of his call. Said Gao, "Yaoga, you are strong. You can freeze the waters with your cold breath. In your broad arms you can carry the wild tempests and clasp the whole earth when I bid you destroy. I will place you in my far north, there to watch the herd of my winter winds when I lose them in the sky. You shall be North Wind. Enter your home." And the bear lowered his head for the leash with which Gao bound him, and submissively took his place in the north sky. In a gentler voice, Gao called Neoga, the fawn, and a soft breeze as of the summer crept over the sky. The air grew fragrant with the odor of flowers, and there were voices as of babbling brooks telling the secrets of the summer to the tune of birds, as Neoga came proudly lifting her head. Said Gao, "You walk with the summer sun and know all its paths. You are gentle and kind as a sunbeam, and will rule my flock of the summer winds in peace. You shall be the south wind. Bend your head while I leash you to the sky, for you are swift, and might return from me to the earth." And the gentle fawn followed Gao to his great gate, which opens the south sky. Again, Gao trumpeted a shrill blast, and all the sky seemed threatening. An ugly darkness crept into the clouds that sent them whirling in circles of confusion. A quarrelsome, shrieking voice snarled through the air, and with a sound as of great claws tearing the heavens into rifts, Dajoji, the panther, sprang to the gates. Said Gao, "You are ugly and fierce, and can fight the strong storms. You can climb the high mountains and tear down the forests. You can carry the whirlwind on your strong back, and toss the great sea waves high in the air, and snarl at the tempests if they stray from my gate. You shall be the west wind. Go to the west sky, where even the sun will hurry to hide when you howl your warning to the night." And Dajoji, dragging his leash as he stealthily crept along, followed Gao to the furthermost west sky. Yet Gao rested not. The earth was flat, and in each of its four corners he must have an assistant. One corner yet remained, and again Gao's strong blast shook the earth, and there arose a moan like the calling of a lost mate. The sky shivered in a cold rain. The whole earth clouded in mist. A crackling sound as of great horns crashing through the forest trees dimmed the air. And Oyandone, the moose, stood stamping his hoofs at the gate. Said Gao, as he strung a strong leash around his neck, "Your breath blows the mist, and can lead the cold rains. Your horns spread wide, and can push back the forests to widen the path for my storms, as with your swift hoofs you race with my winds. You shall be the east wind, and blow your breath to chill the young clouds as they float through the sky," said Gao as he led him to the east sky. "Here you shall dwell forevermore." Thus, with his assistance, does Gao control his storms. And although he must ever remain in his sky lodge, his will is supreme, and his faithful assistants will obey. End of section 65.
Section 66 of the Pearl Storybook, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jennifer Painter. The Pearl Storybook, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's by Ada M. Skinner and Eleanor L. Skinner. North Wind's Frolic. In a large airy castle on the borders of a country far away lived the King of the Winds with his 4 children, North Wind, South Wind, East Wind and West Wind. They were a happy family, for the 4 children were always making merry with the old Wind King. North Wind, however, was a boisterous fellow, for ever causing disorder even in their play. One summer day, North Wind said that he was going out of the castle for a frolic. "Go," called out the king, "but be careful, North Wind, what you do. Your pranks are all very well while you are in the castle here, but out in the world they may do great harm." "Ooh," was all the king heard in answer, and away blustered North Wind out of the castle to the garden nearby. The roses and lilies were just in bloom, and the ripe peaches hung on the trees, ready to be picked. "Woo, woo, woo!" cried the North Wind in his loudest voice, and in a moment the rose petals were scattered all over the ground, the lilies were broken from their stems, and the ripe peaches dropped down right into the mud. In the fields he caused even greater damage. He broke the wheat stems, threw the unripe apples about. He tore the leaves from their branches and tossed them about in the air in all directions. Indeed, one old tree he completely uprooted. The people could stand it no longer. They went to the King of the Winds, who, in his castle, had control over the coming and going of all the winds, and told him what the wicked North Wind had done, and how the garden and the fields had suffered from the misery he had caused them. "I will summon North Wind," said his father. "He shall answer for all this." When North Wind appeared, the king repeated what the people had said. "Is this true, North Wind?" he asked. North Wind could not deny it, for the devastated garden and fields lay before everyone's eyes. "Why did you do it?" asked the king. "Oh," answered North Wind, "I didn't mean it wickedly. I wanted to play with the roses and the lilies and the peaches and all the rest. I didn't think I would do them any harm." "I see," said the king. "If you are such a clumsy fellow, then I do not dare to let you out for a frolic again. I must keep you a prisoner in the castle the whole summer. In the winter, when there are no more flowers and fruit, you may go out and be as boisterous as you like. I see you are fit only for the time of ice and snow, and not for flowers and fruit." End of section 66.
Section 67 of the Pearl Story Book, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Pearl Story Book, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's by Ada M. Skinner and Eleanor L. Skinner. The Months, a Pageant by Christina Rossetti. Boys, January, March, July, August, October, December. Girls, February, April, May, June, September, November. Robin redbreast, lambs and sheep, nightingale and nestlings, various flowers, fruits, etc. Scene, a cottage with its grounds. A room in a large comfortable cottage, a fire burning on the hearth, a table on which the breakfast things have been left standing, January discovered seated by the fire. January. Cold the day and cold the drifted snow, dim the day until the cold dark night. Stirs the fire. Crackle, sparkle, faggot, embers glow. Someone may be plodding through the snow, longing for a light, for the light that you and I can show. If no one else should come, here Robin redbreast's welcome to a crumb, and never troublesome. Robin, why don't you come and fetch your crumb? Here's butter for my hunch of bread, and sugar for your crumb. Here's room upon the hearthrug, if you'll only come. In your scarlet waistcoat, with your keen bright eye, where are you loitering? Wings were made to fly. Make haste to breakfast, come and fetch your crumb, for I'm as glad to see you as you are glad to come. Two robin redbreasts are seen tapping with their beaks at the lattice, which January opens. The birds flutter in, hop about the floor, and peck up the crumbs and sugar thrown to them. They have scarcely finished their meal when a knock is heard at the door. January hangs a guard in front of the fire and opens to February, who appears with a bunch of snowdrops in her hand. Good morrow, sister. February. Brother, joy to you. I've brought some snowdrops, only just a few, but quite enough to prove the world awake, cheerful and hopeful in the frosty dew, and for the pale sun's sake. She hands a few of her snowdrops to January, who retires into the background. While February stands arranging the remaining snowdrops in a glass of water on the window-sill, a soft butting and bleating are heard outside. She opens the door and sees one foremost lamb with other sheep and lambs bleating and crowding toward her. Oh, you little wonder, come in. You wonderful, you woolly soft white lamb. You, panting mother, you come too, and lead that tottering twin safe in. Bring all your bleating kith and kin, except the horny ram. February opens a second door in the background, and the little flock files through into a warm and sheltered compartment out of sight. The lambkin tottering in its walk, with just a fleece to wear. The snowdrop drooping on its stalk, so slender. Snowdrop and lamb a pretty pair, braving the cold for our delight. Both white, both tender. A rattling of the doors and windows, branches seen without tossing violently to and fro. How the doors rattle and the branches sway! Here Brother March comes whirling on his way, with winds that eddy and sing. She turns the handle of the door, which bursts open and discloses March hastening up, both hands full of violets and anemones. Come, show me what you bring, for I have said my say, fulfilled my day, and must away. March, stopping short on the threshold. I blow and arouse through the world's wide house to quicken the torpid earth. Grappling I fling each feeble thing, but bring strong life to the birth. I wrestle and frown and topple down, I wrench, I rend, I uproot. Yet the violet is born where I set the sole of my flying foot. Hands violet and anemones to February, who retires into the background. and in my wake frail windflowers quake, and the catkins promise fruit. I drive oceans ashore with rush and roar, and he cannot say me nay. My harp strings all are the forest's tall, making music when I play. Before March has done speaking, a voice is heard approaching, accompanied by a twittering of birds. April comes along singing, and stands outside and out of sight to finish her song. April, outside. Pretty little three sparrows in a tree, light upon the wing, though you cannot sing, you can chirp of spring. Chirp of spring to me, sparrows from your tree. Never mind the showers, chirp about the flowers, while you build a nest, straws from east and west, feathers from your breast, make the snuggest bowers in a world of flowers. Appearing at the open door. Good morrow and goodbye. If others fly, of all the flying months, you're the most flying. March. Your hope and sweetness, April. April. I've a rainbow in my showers, and a lapful of flowers, and these dear nestlings aged 3 hours. And here's their mother sitting, their fathers merely flitting, to find their breakfast somewhere in my bowers. As he speaks, April shows March her apron full of flowers and nest full of birds. March wanders away into the grounds. April, without entering the cottage, hangs over the hungry nestlings watching them. May arrives unperceived by April and gives her a kiss. April starts and looks around. Ah, May, good morrow. May, and so goodbye. May. That's just your way, sweet April, smile and sigh. Your sorrows half in fun, begun and done, and turn to joy while 20 seconds run. I've gathered flowers all as I came along, at every step a flower, fed by your last bright shower. She divides an armful of all sorts of flowers with April, who strolls away through the garden. And gathering flowers I listen to the song of every bird in bower. Here are my buds of lily and rose, and here's my namesake blossom May. And from a watery spot, see here forget-me-not, with all that blows today. June appears at the further end of the garden, coming slowly towards May, who, seeing her, exclaims, Surely you're come too early, Sister June. June. Indeed I feel as if I came too soon to round your young May moon, and set the world a-gasping at my noon. Yet come I must, so here are strawberries, some flushed and sweet, as many as you please. And here are full-blown roses by the score, more roses and yet more. May, eating strawberries, withdraws among the flower beds. June seats herself in the shadow of a laburnum. Or if I'm lulled by note of bird and bee, or lulled by the noontide silence deep, I need but nestle down beneath my tree and drop asleep. June falls asleep and is not awakened by the voice of July, who, behind the scenes, is heard half singing, half calling. July, behind the scenes. Blue flags, yellow flags, flags all freckled, which will you take? Yellow, blue, speckled. Take which you will, speckled, blue, yellow. Each in its way has not a fellow. Enter July, a basket of many-coloured irises slung upon his shoulders, a bunch of ripe grass in one hand, and a plate piled full of peaches balanced upon the other. He steals up to June and tickles her with the grass. She wakes. June. What? Here already? July. Nay, my tryst is kept. The longest days slipped by you while you slept. I've brought you one curved pyramid of bloom. Hands her the plate. Not flowers but peaches, gathered where the bees, as downy bask and boom, in sunshine and in gloom of trees. But get you in, a storm is at my heels. The whirlwind whistles and wheels, lightning flashes and thunder peals, flying and following hard upon my heels. June takes shelter in a thickly woven arbour. The roar of a storm sweeps up from the east to the lurid west. The darkening sky, like a cup, is filled with rain to the brink. The sky is purple and fire, blackness and noise and unrest. The earth, parched with desire, opens her mouth to drink. Have done with thunder and fire, O sky with the rainbow crest. O earth, have done with desire. Drink and drink deep and rest. Enter August, carrying a sheaf made up of different kinds of grain. Hail, brother August, flushed and warm, and scatheless from my storm. Your hands are full of corn, I see, as full as hands can be. And earth and air both smell as sweet as balm, in their recovered calm, and that they owe to me. July retires into a shrubbery. August. Wheat sways heavy, oats are airy, barley bows a graceful head, short and small shoots up canary, each of these is someone's bread. Bread for man or bread for beast, or at very least, a bird's savoury feast. August descries September toiling across the lawn. My harvest home is ended, and I spy September drawing nigh, with the first thought of autumn in her eye, and the first sigh of autumn wind among her locks that fly. September arrives, carrying upon her head a basket heaped high with fruit. September. Unload me, brother. I have brought a few plums and these pears for you, a dozen kinds of apples, 1 or 2 melons, some figs all bursting through their skins, and pearled with dew, these damsons violet blue. While September is speaking, August lifts the basket to the ground, selects various fruits, and withdraws slowly along the gravel walk, eating a pear as he goes. My song is half a sigh, because my green leaves die. Sweet are my fruits, but all my leaves are dying. And well may autumn sigh, and well may I, who watch the sere leaves flying. October enters briskly, some leafy twigs bearing different sorts of nuts in one hand, and a long ripe hop-vine trailing after him from the other. A dahlia is stuck in his buttonhole. October. Nay, cheer up, sister. Life is not quite over, even if the year has done with corn and clover, with flowers and leaves. Besides, in fact, it's true, some leaves remain and some flowers too. For me and you, now see my crops. Offering his produce to September. I've brought you nuts and hops, and when the leaf drops, why, the walnut drops. October wreathes the hop-vine about September's neck, and gives her the nut twigs. They enter the cottage together, but without shutting the door. She steps into the background. He advances to the hearth, removes the guard, stirs up the smouldering fire, and arranges several chestnuts ready to roast. Crack your first nut and light your first fire. Roast your first chestnut crisp on the bar. Make the logs sparkle, stir the blaze higher. Logs are cheery as sun or as star. Logs we can find wherever we are. Spring one soft day will open the leaves. Spring one bright day will lure back the flowers. Never fancy my whistling wind grieves. never fancy I've tears in my showers. Dance nights and days, and dance on my hours. Sees November approaching. Here comes my youngest sister, looking dim and grim, with dismal ways. What cheer, November? November, entering and shutting the door. Naught have I to bring, tramping a chill and shivering, except these pine cones for a blaze, except a fog which follows and stuffs up all the hollows, except a hoar-frost here and there, except some shooting stars, which dart their luminous cars, trackless and noiseless through the keen night air. October, shrugging his shoulders, withdraws into the background, while November throws her pine cones on the fire and sits down listlessly. The earth lies asleep, grown tired of all that's high or deep. There's naught desired and naught required, save a sleep. I rock the cradle of the earth, I lull her with a sigh, and know that she will wake to mirth by and by. Through the window, December is seen running and leaping in the direction of the door. He knocks. Ah, here's my youngest brother, come at last. Calls out without rising. Come in, December. He opens the door and enters, loaded with evergreens in berry, etc. Come and shut the door, for now it's snowing fast. It snows and will snow more and more. Don't let it drift in on the floor. But you're all aglow. How can you be rosy and warm and smiling in the cold? December. Nay, no closed doors for me, but open doors and open hearts in glee to welcome young and old. Dimmest and brightest month am I? My short days end, my lengthening days begin. What matters more or less sun in the sky, when all is sun within? He begins making a wreath as he sings. Ivy and privet dark as night, I weave with hips and haws a cheerful show, and holly for a beauty and delight, and milky mistletoe. While high above them all I set yew twigs and Christmas roses pure and pale, then spring her snowdrop and her violet may keep so sweet and frail, may keep each merry singing bird of all her happy birds that singing build, for I've a carol which some shepherds heard once in a wintry field. While December concludes his song, all the other months troop in from the garden or advance out of the background. The 12 join hands in a circle and begin dancing around in a stately measure as the curtain falls. Abridged. End of section 67. Recording by Alan Mapstone in Oxford, England.
Section 68 of the Pearl Storybook, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jennifer Painter. The Pearl Storybook, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's by Ada M. Skinner and Eleanor L. Skinner. Prince Winter, Carl Ewald. The Prince of Winter sat on the mountains, an old man with white hair and beard. His naked breast was shaggy, shaggy his legs and hands. He looked strong and wild, with cold, stern eyes. But he was not angry as when spring drove him from the valley, and when autumn did not go quickly enough. He looked out over the kingdom calmly, for he knew it was his. And when he found anything dead or empty or desolate, he plucked at his great white beard and gave a harsh and satisfied laugh. But all that lived in the land was struck with terror when it looked into his cold eyes. The trees shook in their thick bark, and the bushes struck their branches together in consternation. The mouse became quite snow-blind when she peeped outside the door. The stag looked mournfully over the white meadow. "My muzzle can still break through the ice when I drink," he said. "I can still scrape the snow to one side and find a tuft of grass. But if things go on like this for another week, then it's all up with me." The crow and the chaffinch and the sparrow and the tit had quite lost their voices. They thought of the other birds who had departed in time, and they who remained knew not where to turn in their distress. At last they set out in a row to carry their humble greeting to the new lord of the land. "Here come your birds, O mightiest of princes," said the crow, and stood and marked time in the white snow. "The others left the country as soon as you announced your coming, but we have remained to submit us to your sway. Now be a gracious lord to us and grant us food." "We bow before your highness," said the chaffinch. "We have so longed for you," said the tit, and he put his head on one side. And the sparrow said the same as the others, in a tone of deep respect. But the Prince of Winter laughed at them disdainfully. "Ha, you time-serving birds! In summer's time you amused yourself merrily. In autumn's you ate yourselves stout and fat. And as soon as spring strikes up, you will dance to his piping like the others. I hate you and your screaming and squalling and the trees you hop about in. You are all here to defy me, and I shall do for you if I can." Then he rose in all his strength. "I have my own birds, and now you shall see them." He clapped his hands and sang. "Wee snowbirds, white snowbirds, white snowbirds, wee snowbirds, through fields skim along, to jubilant spring I grudge music of no birds, to summer no song. Come, winter's mute messengers, swift birds and slow birds, white snowbirds, wee snowbirds, till the valley be soft as down for your nestling of numberless ice eggs by frosty rims spanned. Now rushing, now resting, white snowbirds, wee snowbirds, skim soft through the land." And winter's birds came. Suddenly it darkened, and the air became full of little black specks, which descended and turned into great white snowflakes. They fell over the ground in an endless multitude. There was now not a blade of grass, nor yet a stone to be seen. Everything was smooth and soft and white. Only the trees stood out high in the air, and the river flowed black through the meadow. "I know how to crush you," said the Prince of Winter. And when evening came, he told the wind to go down. Then the waves became small and still. Winter stared at them with his cold eyes, and the ice built its bridge from bank to bank. In vain the waves tried to hum spring's song. There was no strength in their voices. Next morning there was nothing left to the river but a narrow channel, and when one more night had passed, the bridge was finished. Again the Prince of Winter called for his white birds, and soon the carpet was drawn over the river till it was no longer possible to see where land began or water ended. But the trees stood boldly out of the deep snow. The firs had kept all their leaves and were so green that it was quite shocking to behold. Wherever they stood, they were a protection against the frost and a shelter against the snow, and the chaffinch and the other small birds found refuge under their roofs. The Prince of Winter looked at them angrily. "If I could but break you," he said. "You stand in the midst of my kingdom, keeping guard for summer, and you give shelter to the birds who disturb the peace of my land. If only I had snow enough to bury you." But the trees stood strong under winter's wrath and waved their long branches. "You have taken from us what you can," they said. "Farther than that you cannot go, We will wait calmly for better times." When they had said this, Winter suddenly set eyes upon tiny little buds round about the twigs. He saw the little brown mice trip out for a run in the snow and disappear again into their snug parlours before his eyes. He heard the hedgehog snoring in the hedge, and the crows kept on screaming in his ears. Through his own eyes he saw the noses of the frogs stick up from the bottom of the pond. "Am I the master or not?" he shouted. He tore at his beard with both hands. He heard the anemones breathe peacefully and lightly in the mould. He heard thousands of grubs bore deep into the wood of the trees as cheerfully as though summer were in the land. He saw the bees crawl about in their busy hive and share the honey they had collected in summer and have a happy time. He saw the bat in the hollow tree, the worm deep in the ground, and, wherever he turned, he saw millions of eggs and grubs and chrysalids, well guarded and waiting confidently for him to go away. He stamped on the ground and shouted in his loud, hoarse voice, "Roar forth, mine anger, roar and rouse! What breathes below earth's girder? By thousands slay them!" He shouted it over the land. The ice broke and split into long cracks. It sounded like thunder from the bottom of the river. Then the storm broke loose. The gale roared so that you could hear the trees fall crashing in the forest. The ice was split in two, and the huge floes heaped up into towering icebergs. The snow fell and drifted over meadow and hill. Sky and earth were blended into one. It was piercingly cold, and where the snow had been blown away, the ground was as hard as stone. The Prince of Winter stood in the valley and looked upon all this with content. He went into the forest, where the snow was frozen to windward right up to the tips of the smooth beech trunks. But in the boughs of the fir trees it lay so thick that they were weighted right down to the ground. "You may be summer's servants," he said, "but still you have to resign yourselves to wearing my livery. And now the sun shall shine on you, and I will have a glorious day." He bade the sun come out, and he came. He rode over a bright blue sky, and all that was still alive in the valley raised itself towards him for warmth. "Call spring back to the valleys, give us summer again." The sun gleamed upon the hoar frost, but could not melt it. He stared down at the snow, but could not thaw it. The valley lay silent. "That's how I like to see the land," said Winter. The Prince of Winter sat on his mountain throne again and surveyed his kingdom and was glad. His great cold eyes stared, while he growled in his beard. Proud of speed and hard of hand, a cruel lord to follow, Winter locks up sea and land, blocks up every hollow. Summer coaxes, sweet and bland, flowers in soft vigour. At Winter's harsh and grim command, they die of ruthless rigour. Short and cold is Winter's day, long and worse night's hours. Few birds languish in his pay, and yet fewer flowers. The days wore on, and Winter reigned over the land. The little brown mice had eaten their last nut. The hedgehog was hungry, and the crows were nearly giving in. Then, suddenly, there came the sound of singing. "Play up, play soon, keep time, ye wavelets blue and tender, keep time, burst ice and rime in equinoctial splendour." Up leaped Winter and stared with his hands over his brows. Down below in the valley stood the Prince of Spring, young and straight in his green garb, with the lute slung over his shoulder. His long hair waved in the wind, and his face was soft and round. His mouth was ever smiling, and his eyes were dreamy and moist. End of section 68.
Section 69 of the Pearl Story Book. Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Pearl Story Book. Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's by Ada M. Skinner and Eleanor L. Skinner. How Spring and Winter Met by Edith M. Thomas. The winter and the spring were met. The winter threw a fleecy net and caught the young spring overnight. He put to sleep the budding tree within a cloister dim and white, and the little golden crocus flower that comes too early for the bee he hid away from sunrise hour. The brook was conscious of his power and lost its trick of babbling words. But spring awoke despite his craft, and out of windows looked and laughed. At first he set to sing all birds, with twittering voices small and clear, and bade them say they felt no grief to find the snow a mildewed leaf heaped up in nests they built last year. They found a crystal alcove high, the bluebird carolled to the sky, the robin whistled cheer, good cheer. The sparrow rung his matin bells, and far away in reedy dells the quail a friendly greeting sent. Then was the stifled pine not loath to shuffle off the dull white sloth, then leaped the brook by icy stair, and snapped his fetters as he went. The sun shone out most full and fair, and winter rose and struck his tent. End of section 69, read by Alan Mapstone. End of the Pearl Story Book, Stories and Legends of Winter, Christmas and New Year's by Ada M. Skinner and Eleanor L. Skinner.